The fluorescent lights of the bustling mall hummed like a distant swarm of bees, casting a sterile glow over the weekend crowd. Shoppers shuffled past with bags dangling from their arms, children darting between legs, the air thick with the scent of pretzels and cheap perfume. In the heart of it all, near the food court, a young girl no older than 8 sat huddled on a bench, her small frame shaking with silent sobs. Her pink backpack lay discarded at her feet, one strap torn as if yanked in haste. She clutched a crumpled drawing, a stick-figure family under a sunny sky, while tears carved clean paths down her dust-streaked cheeks. No one stopped. A mother hurried by with a stroller, eyes fixed on her phone. A group of teens laughed loudly, oblivious. The girls' cries were just another echo in the din, drowned out by the world rushing past. Then the roar cut through it all. Not the mechanical growl of engines, but a deep, resonant thunder that turned heads. Ethan Ridge. Harlan strode into the mall, like a shadow from another life, his leather vest scarred from years on the open road, tattoos snaking up his arms like forgotten maps. At 6'4", with a beard streaked in silver and eyes that had seen too many sunrises over empty highways, he looked every bit the outlaw the whispers painted him to be. His boots thudded against the tiled floor, drawing wary glances. But Ethan wasn't here for trouble. He carried no helmet under his arm, no saddlebag slung over his shoulder. Instead, in his calloused hands, he held a weathered violin case, its latches worn smooth from countless miles. He spotted the girl first, her vulnerability hitting him like gravel under tires. Memories flooded back unbidden. The face of his own daughter lost to a fever 13 years ago, her tiny hand slipping from his in a hospital room that still haunted his dreams. Ethan had buried that pain under layers of chrome and brotherhood, riding with the Iron Vow crew, a band of weathered souls, bound by oaths sworn in the dust of forgotten wars. But promises lingered, etched into his soul like the faded ink on his knuckles. Protect the innocent. He'd vowed to his late wife on her deathbed, a pledge to honor the fragility he'd once failed to shield. Today, that old oath pulled him here, to this fluorescent cage of commerce, after a tip from an old contact about a runaway kid caught in the crossfire of a custody mess gone wrong. Ethan knelt before the girl, his massive frame folding with surprising gentleness. The crowd parted slightly, murmuring. "Hey, little one," he rumbled, his voice a low gravel honed by wind and whiskey. "What's got you out here alone?" She looked up, eyes wide with fear, but something in his steady gaze held her. Words tumbled out in a whisper. Her name was Lily. Her dad had promised to meet her after shopping, but he never came. Instead, a stranger had grabbed her arm roughly, leaving bruises blooming like dark flowers before she wriggled free and hid. The mall security. They'd shrugged it off as a family matter, too busy with shoplifters to dig deeper. Rage simmered in Ethan's chest, but he swallowed it, remembering the creed of his crew. Justice through honor, not fists. He glanced around, spotting the security desk in the distance, where a bored guard scrolled on his phone. No help there. But Ethan had another way. He opened the violin case with a soft click, revealing the instrument inside. A 1920s Stradivarius copy, salvaged from his wife's attic, its wood polished to a warm sheen. He'd learned to play in the quiet nights after her passing, fingers calloused from handlebars now coaxing melodies from strings as a balm for his fractured heart. Beethoven's words echoed in his mind, music as the mediator between life's pain and joy. "Stay right here, Lily," he said, standing. "I'm gonna make sure folks listen." He positioned himself at the mall's central piano, an ornate grand usually ignored amid the chatter. A sign read, "For events only," but Ethan ignored it. His fingers brushed the keys first, testing the silence. Then the bow met the violin's strings in a prelude that blurred the lines. He began with the slow, haunting strains of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the notes rising like mist over a desert dawn. The first measures were soft, almost tentative, weaving through the mall's cacophony, a single violin against the world's indifference. Heads turned, a shopper paused mid-stride, coffee cup forgotten. The teens fell quiet, their laughter snuffed out. Ethan's eyes closed, the music pouring from him like a confession. The melody built layers of sorrow and resolve, the violin's cry echoing the girl's muffled sniffles. Strangers gathered, drawn inexorably, their faces shifting from confusion to something deeper. An elderly woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Her father scooped his own child closer, as if shielding her from the invisible storm. The security guard looked up, frowning, but the notes held him fast, an invisible chain. Lily watched from the bench, her sobs easing as the music wrapped around her like a blanket. Ethan's performance wasn't just notes, it was a stand, a moral thunderclap in a place of shallow distractions. He'd walked into this mall on a whim, chasing a lead from his cruise network, a promise to an old war buddy whose niece matched Lily's description. But now, it felt like fate, the universe demanding he honor the vow he'd nearly forgotten. The sonata swelled to its emotional peak, the violin's voice soaring, piercing the air with raw beauty. Tears traced paths down cheeks in the crowd, strangers united in a moment of unexpected grace. As the final note lingered, fading into the hush, applause erupted, tentative at first, then thunderous. Ethan lowered the violin, his chest heaving, sweat beading on his brow. He met Lily's gaze across the space, nodding once. She smiled, tentative, the first crack in her fear. But the real work was just beginning. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone recognized the girl from a missing alert. Another pulled out a phone to call authorities who might actually listen now. Ethan's intervention had shifted the tide, turning indifference to empathy, silence to solidarity. He returned to Lily, kneeling again. "Your dad's coming, kid. And no one's gonna hurt you on my watch." She nodded, clutching his sleeve. In that instant, Ethan felt the weight of his scars lighten just a fraction, the biker, the guardian, fulfilling a promise that bridged his broken past to this fragile present. The mall, once a blur of apathy, now pulsed with quiet purpose. But shadows lingered. The stranger who'd grabbed her wasn't gone, and Ethan's crew would need to ride if justice demanded it. For now, though, the music had spoken, and the world had frozen to hear. The crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with the magic of the moment. But Ethan knew better than to trust the calm. He scooped up Lily's backpack, slinging it over his shoulder, and guided her toward the security desk. The guard, now flustered, radioed for real help, a social worker perhaps, or the cops who wouldn't dismiss her. As they walked, Lily's hand slipped into his, small and trusting. "Why'd you play that?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ethan glanced down, the violin's case bumping against his leg. "Because sometimes words ain't enough. Music, it reaches the heart direct, reminds folks what's worth fighting for." He thought of his daughter, of the lullabies he'd hummed in that sterile hospital, too late to save her. The iron vow had become his anchor after that. Brothers like Jax and Marco, veterans who'd traded battlefields for backroads, swearing oaths to protect the vulnerable. One of them had spotted Lily's photo online, a desperate post from her frantic mother, and messaged Ethan, "Ridge, you're nearby. Make it right." A simple ask, but it stirred the embers of his old promise. At the desk, the guard stammered apologies, but Ethan cut him off with a glare that could curdle milk. "Get her mom on the line, now." Minutes later, a woman's voice cracked over the speaker, relief mingled with terror. Lily's mother, Sarah, had been delayed by a flat tire on the highway, her ex-husband's threats echoing in her mind. The stranger who'd grabbed Lily, a low-life enforcer for her ex trying to intimidate. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd seen that script play out in dive bars and dusty towns, corruption wearing a human face. As they waited, Ethan pulled out a worn photo from his wallet, his family frozen in time, smiles bright against a backdrop of wildflowers. "See this? That's why I do it. Promises don't die easy." Lily traced the image with her finger, and for the first time, her eyes sparkled. The social worker arrived, kind but official, and Ethan stepped back, watching as Lily was enveloped in a hug from her relieved mother, who arrived breathless, car keys still in hand, but gratitude burned in Sarah's eyes when she turned to him. "You saved her." "How can I—" "Just keep her safe," Ethan replied, voice steady. "That's all." He turned to leave, the violin case a faithful companion, but Sarah called after him. "Wait, my ex. He's dangerous. Connected. If you hadn't been here—" Ethan paused, the mall's lights flickering like distant stars. The Iron Vows code hummed in his veins. "Once you stepped in, you rode it through." "Tell me everything," he said, and in that choice, the threads of fate tightened, pulling him into a storm where honor would clash with shadows long buried. The biker who played Beethoven had awakened more than tears. He'd ignited a reckoning, one note at a time. The mall's fluorescent hum seemed to dull as Ethan and Sarah stepped into a quieter alcove near the exit. The violin case propped against a concrete pillar like a sentinel. Lily clung to her mother's side, her small hand gripping Sarah's skirt, the pink backpack now securely zipped and slung over her shoulder. The air carried a faint tang of rain from outside, seeping through the glass doors, mingling with the lingering echo of pretzels and polished floors. Sarah's face was a map of exhaustion, dark circles under her eyes, hair tousled from the frantic drive, but her gaze held a fierce gratitude that cut through the weariness. "Thank you doesn't cover it," she said, voice steady despite the tremor. "That man, he's not just some angry ex. Victor Kane, he's got ties to everything shady in this town. Construction rackets, backroom deals with the cops. He thinks Lily's his leverage to force me back." Her words hung heavy, laced with the quiet desperation of someone who'd stared down shadows too many times. Ethan nodded, his silver-streaked beard catching the light as he leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his broad chest. The leather of his vest creaked softly, a sound like old leather-bound books opening to a painful chapter. He'd heard stories like this before, whispered around campfires on long rides with the Iron Vow. Men like Victor, hiding behind suits and smiles, twisting the law into knots for their own gain. Ethan's own past flickered in his mind, a dusty courtroom in a border town years ago where he'd watched a buddy's family torn apart by similar greed. That night, under a starless sky, he'd sworn to the crew, no more standing by. The vow wasn't just ink on skin, it was the rhythm of engines on empty roads, the silent pact that bound broken men into something unbreakable. "Tell me the details," Ethan said, his voice low, pulling a small notebook from his vest pocket, the kind bikers used for route maps and favors owed. Sarah glanced at Lily, then knelt to whisper something that made the girl nod solemnly. "Go sit over there, sweetie. Mommy and the nice man need to talk." Lily scampered to a nearby bench, pulling out her drawing to color, but her eyes darted back, watchful. Sarah straightened, exhaling sharply. "It started after the divorce. Victor lost custody. Fair and square, the judge said. But he doesn't accept no. Last week, he cornered me at work, a diner on the edge of town. Said if I didn't sign over the house, he'd make sure Lily disappeared for a bit. Today was supposed to be his supervised visit, but he sent that goon instead. I got a flat on the highway, suspicious, like someone tampered with it. By the time I got here, she was gone." Her fists clenched, nails digging into palms, the faint bruises on her wrists hinting at past confrontations, marks of restraint, not blows. Ethan's jaw tightened, the violin's strings still vibrating in his memory, a counterpoint to the rising storm. He jotted notes, names, places, the diner's faded sign he could picture from her description. "You file a report." She shook her head. "Cops? They're in his pocket. One even showed up at my door last month, checking in on Victor's behalf." Corruption like that festered, Ethan knew, turning justice into a hollow echo. It mirrored the betrayal he'd faced in his military days, a commanding officer who'd sold out his unit for a promotion, leaving scars that no amount of road dust could bury. He closed the notebook, tucking it away. "You ain't alone in this anymore. My crew, the Iron Vow, we handle things right. No guns, no games, just truth and backup." Sarah's eyes widened, the name ringing like a legend in these parts. Whispers of the Vow spread through truck stops and veteran halls, a brotherhood of riders who'd pulled families from the brink, exposing graft with evidence, not vengeance. Ethan pulled out his phone, a battered flip model that had survived more spills than he cared to count. He texted Jax, his second-in-command, a former medic with hands steady as a surgeon's. "Mall run. Kid safe, but trouble brewing. Victor Kane. Need eyes." The reply buzzed almost immediately. "On it, Ridge. Marco's pulling records. Ride out at dusk." Ethan pocketed the device, the weight of loyalty settling like a familiar saddle. "They're mobilizing. We'll dig into this, Victor. Quiet but thorough. You got a safe place tonight?" Sarah nodded toward the doors. "My sister's out of town. But what about you? Why help us? Strangers like that?" Ethan's gaze drifted to Lily, her crayons scratching softly against paper, sketching what looked like a violin under a moon. "Had a girl once, my Ellie. Lost her young, to something the docs couldn't fight. Promised her ma I'd keep the world right for the little ones left behind. Been riding that promise ever since." The words came out rough, edged with the gravel of unshed grief, but they carried the truth of a man who'd rebuilt himself from ruins. Sarah reached out, squeezing his arm briefly. "Then you're a guardian. Lily's lucky." Outside, the sky had deepened to a bruised purple, the first drops of rain pattering against the glass like hesitant applause. Ethan shouldered the violin case, its wood warm from his touch. "Get her home. I'll call tomorrow with what we find." As Sarah gathered Lily, hugging her close, the girl turned back. "Play more music? For me?" Ethan's lips quirked in a rare half-smile. "Count on it, kid. Beethoven's got more to say." They parted ways under the mall's awning, Sarah's taillights fading into the downpour. Ethan lingered, rain slicking his beard, the storm mirroring the one brewing inside. He fired up his Harley, parked in the lot like a faithful steed, the engine's rumble a low growl against the thunder. Tires cut through puddles, spraying arcs of water that caught the streetlights in silver flashes. The road unwound before him, leading to the Vow's outpost, a weathered garage on the city's fringe where brothers gathered around a fire pit, sharing stories that knit their chosen family tighter. By the time he arrived, the crew was assembled, Jax with his laptop glowing in the dim light, Marco poring over printouts. Their faces etched with the same quiet resolve, Ethan felt. The air smelled of motor oil and brewing coffee, the garage's walls lined with patched leathers and faded photos of rides past. "Kane's dirty," Jack said, sliding over a folder. "Council ties, payoffs to keep eyes blind. That goon's got priors, harassment, nothing stuck." Marco nodded, his voice a steady baritone. "We got a witness from the diner. Saw the tampering, poetic justice, ridge, truth over muscle." Ethan absorbed it, the pieces forming a map of moral terrain. No charging in. The Vow's way was surgical, exposing rot to the light. But as rain hammered the tin roof, he felt the pull of his old scars, the fevered nights, the empty crib, the vow that had kept him from crumbling. Helping Sarah and Lily wasn't just duty, it was redemption's quiet song, notes building toward a crescendo where honor silenced the cynics. He stepped outside, violin in hand, letting the rain wash over him. In the distance, Lightning cracked, illuminating the horizon like a promise kept. The ride ahead would test them, pitting loyalty against corruption's web, but Ethan knew. In a world of broken oaths, the iron vow rode unbroken. The storm raged on, but so did they. One careful step, one truthful note, toward dawn's unyielding light. The rain had eased to a persistent drizzle by the time Ethan pushed through the garage door, the scent of wet asphalt and cooling engines clinging to his clothes like a second skin. Inside, the Iron Vow's outpost hummed with purpose. Fluorescent bulbs flickering over workbenches cluttered with tools and half-assembled Harleys. Jax looked up from his laptop, his wire-rimmed glasses reflecting lines of code and grainy surveillance stills. Marco leaned against a rusted toolbox, arms folded, his scarred knuckles tapping a slow rhythm on the metal, a habit from his days defusing bombs in forgotten conflicts. The fire pit outside crackled faintly through the open bay door, casting dancing shadows that made the space feel alive, like the heartbeat of their unbreakable bond. "Ridge," Jax said, voice cutting through the low murmur of a radio playing old blues. "Pulled what I could on Kane. Guy's a snake in a suit. Owns half the construction bids in the county. Shell companies. Bribes funneled through charities. That flat tire? Not random. Mechanic buddy confirmed tampered lug nuts, fresh scratches like from a pro tool." He spun the screen toward Ethan, pixels glowing with blurred photos. Victor Kane shaking hands with a uniformed officer at a ribbon cutting, his smile sharp as a switchblade. Another image showed the goon from the mall, a hulking figure with a neck tattoo snaking toward his jaw, exiting a courthouse with charges dropped. Ethan's eyes narrowed, the violin's case still at his feet like an anchor grounding the rising tide of anger. He could almost hear the strings humming, a reminder to channel fury into focus. Witness from the diner. Marco handed over a scribbled note, his handwriting blocky from years gripping rifle stocks. "Yeah, waitress named Grace. Saw the goon lurking by Sarah's car that morning. Won't talk to cops, fears retaliation, but she'll meet us neutral ground. Says Kane's been pressuring her boss for protection money, turning the place into a front." The pieces slotted together, a mosaic of moral decay that Ethan had scraped against too many times. It echoed the betrayal in his own history, that long-ago deployment where orders from above left his squad exposed, promises of support evaporating like desert mirage. He'd carried that weight home, burying it under the roar of engines and the vow's oaths, sworn around a campfire after his wife's funeral, to stand for the overlooked, to unearth truth where power buried it. Lily's wide eyes in the mall, Sarah's quiet plea, they reignited that fire, turning personal redemption into a collective stand. "All right," Ethan rumbled, rubbing his beard, the silver strands damp from the rain. "We ride smart. Jax, you and I hit the diner at first light, get Grace's full story on tape, something airtight. Marco, loop in the network. See if any old contacts in the DA's office owe us. No direct confrontation yet. Kane's web's too tangled for a bull rush." The crew nodded, a silent accord forged in shared scars. Jax cracked his knuckles, the sound like popping gravel. "I've got a drone feed from the mall lot. Caught the goon tailing Sarah's car post-reunion. Plates traced to a dummy corp under Kane's name. As the night deepened, they mapped it out over lukewarm coffee, the garage filling with the earthy aroma that chased away the chill. Ethan stepped out briefly, violin in hand, to let the cool air clear his head. Under the awning, he drew the bow across the strings in a soft rendition of Beethoven's Pathétique, slow adagio, notes weeping like the raindrops sliding from the eaves. The melody wrapped around him, a private vigil for Ellie, whose laughter he'd trade kingdoms to hear again. Music had become his confessor, strings voicing the grief words couldn't touch, reminding him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but the forge of true strength. Back inside, the plan solidified. Dawn would bring movement, but sleep evaded Ethan. He bunked on a cot in the corner, the violin's case open beside him like a talisman. Dreams came in fragments, Lily's drawing, morphing into his daughter's face, overlaid with Kane's sneer, the mall's lights twisting into courtroom fluorescence. He woke before the others, the sky outside paling to grey, and fired up his Harley. The engine's throaty purr vibrated through his bones as Jax pulled alongside on his own bike, a sleek black cruiser modified for stealth runs. The diner sat on the town's frayed edge, neon sign buzzing, open 24/7, against a backdrop of strip malls and sodium lamps. They parked in the shadows, helmets tucked under arms, and entered like ghosts, leather vests drawing glances from late-night truckers, nursing eggs and hash. Grace was behind the counter, mid-30s with tired eyes and a name tag pinned crookedly to her apron. She spotted Ethan's nod, a pre-arranged signal from Marco's call, and led them to a back booth, the vinyl seats creaking under their weight. The air smelled of grease and overbrewed coffee, the jukebox crooning a faded country tune about lost highways. "Make it quick," Grace whispered, sliding into the seat opposite, her hands twisting a napkin into shreds. "Kane's boys come in here regular. Last one who talked ended up with accidental brakes, failing." Ethan's presence seemed to steady her, his bulk a shield against the fear. Jax set up a discreet recorder hidden in his palm. Words spilled out, the goon's visit to the diner, threats veiled as advice, the tampered tire witnessed from the kitchen window. "He's got the sheriff's ear," she added, voice dropping. "Pushed through a zoning change last year, bulldozed a community center for his latest project. Folks lost homes, and no one's lifting a finger." Ethan listened, committing each detail to memory, the violinist's ear attuned to the cadence of truth amid lies. It was poetic, this web of corruption, Kane preying on the fragile. Much like the system that had failed his own family years back, denying benefits after his wife's illness drained them dry. "You've got guts speaking up," he said, sliding her a burner phone from his pocket. "Call if things shift. The vow protects its own now." Gratitude flickered in her eyes, a spark against the dimness as they slipped out, the diner's bell jingling like a warning. Back on the road, wind whipping through Ethan's beard, Jax's voice crackled over helmet comms. "This ties to bigger fish, council votes, maybe even state grants. We leak it right, Kane crumbles without a shot fired." Ethan nodded to the empty air, the horizon brightening with promise. But as they crested a hill, headlights flared in the rear view. A black SUV, too sleek for these backroads. Entailing at a distance. The goon, or Kane himself sniffing the wind? Adrenaline surged, but Ethan held steady, throttling even. No panic, just the measured pursuit of justice, engines singing their oath against the dawn. The chase wove through suburbs awakening, coffee steam rising from doorsteps, dogs barking at the intrusion. Ethan signaled Jax to split, divide and document. He veered left toward the warehouse district, the SUV following doggedly, tires hissing on wet pavement. Heart pounding like a sonata's crescendo, Ethan spotted an opening, a construction site, Kane's latest mark, skeletal beams rising like accusations. He gunned it through the gate, the bike kicking up mud, and ditched behind a stack of rebar. Footsteps crunched outside, the goon's silhouette hulking in the morning light. Ethan dismounted silently, violin case in one hand, the other flexing instinctively. No weapon, just resolve, the weight of promises carried across miles. "You lost?" he called, stepping into view, voice steady as a bowstroke. The goon froze, recognition dawning, but before words could fly, sirens wailed distant. Jax's doing, looping in a sympathetic patrol, not on Kane's leash. The man bolted, SUV peeling out in a spray of gravel, leaving Ethan amid the half-built ruins, unscathed but alert. By midday, the crew reconvened at the garage, evidence stacking like bricks. Grace's tape, drone footage, even a tip from Marco's network about Kane's upcoming council meeting. Sarah called, voice laced with hope. Lily's asking for her guardian angel. Whatever you're doing. Thank you. Ethan glanced at the violin, its strings silent but potent. The path ahead twisted toward confrontation, not with fists, but with the unyielding light of truth. In a world quick to break oaths, the iron vow and one biker's melody would hold the line, note by resolute note. The midday sun hung heavy over the warehouse district, turning the air into a shimmering haze that blurred the edges of rusted silos and chain-link fences. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, the grit of construction dust clinging to his skin like a second layer of resolve. The chase's adrenaline had faded, leaving a taut vigilance in its wake. The goon's SUV long gone, but the echo of its engine a reminder that Kane's reach extended further than any single shadow. Back at the garage, the Iron Vow's outpost thrummed with focused energy, the scent of fresh ink from printed documents mingling with the sharp tang of machine oil. Jax hunched over his laptop, fingers flying across keys, while Marco sorted through a stack of faded ledgers, salvaged from a tipster's anonymous drop. Ethan set the violin case down with a soft thud, the wood vibrating faintly as if eager to join the fray. "That tale was no coincidence," he said, voice low and steady, pulling a chair up to the workbench. The crew's faces, lined with the quiet scars of battles past, Jax's from a roadside IED that stole his hearing in one ear, Marco's from shrapnel that ended his service, mirrored Ethan's own unyielding determination. This wasn't just about Lily and Sarah anymore. It was a stand against the rot that festered in quiet towns, the kind that had claimed his wife's health benefits years ago, in paperwork lost in bureaucratic mazes while her strength ebbed away. The vow he'd made then, whispered over her grave under a relentless sun, pulsed like a bass note. Protect the fragile threads of justice, weave them back with hands that wouldn't break. Jax leaned back, rubbing his eyes behind the glasses. Got more. That council meeting tomorrow. Kane's pushing a vote on eminent domain for the East Side. Displaces a whole neighborhood, mostly vets and single mums like Sarah. Our evidence ties it to his slush fund. Payoffs to sway the vote, including that sheriff's deputy who investigated her flat tire. He tapped the screen, pulling up a grainy email chain, redacted names, but the intent clear as cracked pavement. Marco grunted, flipping through the ledgers, and this forged invoices from his construction firm, siphoning public money for ghost projects. Grace's tape seals it. Her boss confirms Kane's threats shut down complaints. Ethan absorbed it all, the pieces forming a noose of accountability tightening around Kane's empire. But doubt flickered, a psychological undercurrent he'd learned to navigate on long rides alone, the highway's white lines blurring into questions of cost. Exposing this could drag innocence into the light. Sarah's sister, perhaps, or Grace's family, if Kane lashed out first. He thought of Lily's drawing, tucked now in his vest pocket, its simple lines a talisman against the cynicism. We present it clean, he decided, standing to pace the concrete floor, boots echoing like distant thunder. No vigilante stuff. Leaked to a clean reporter I know from the old days. Woman named Olivia, runs a blog that punches above its weight. She owes the vow for pulling her brother out of a bad spot last year. The plan took shape around the fire pit as dusk crept in, flames licking the evening chill from the air, casting golden flickers on their faces. Smoke curled upward, carrying the woody scent of pine logs mixed with the faint metallic bite of rain-scented earth. They ate simple, grilled burgers from the communal cooler, juices dripping onto paper plates, while hashing details, laughter punctuating the gravity like brief respites in a sonata. Jax shared a story from their last ride, a dust-choked convoy that shut down a corrupt trucking ring, bonds forged not in blood, but in the shared silence after victory. Ethan listened, the warmth seeping into his bones, reminding him why the Iron Vow endured. A chosen family, oaths etched deeper than any tattoo, redeeming the isolation of loss through collective honor. Night fell fully, stars pricking the velvet sky like scattered notes on sheet music. Ethan slipped away to the garage's rear, where a lone bulb swung gently, illuminating the violin's curves. He drew the bow across the strings, easing into the adagio of Beethoven's Violin Sonata No. 9, the Kreutzer, passionate yet restrained, a dialogue between sorrow and defiance. The melody unfurled in the quiet, notes trembling in the still air, evoking Ellie's faint smile in fevered dreams, the way Sarah's eyes had softened with hope. Music was his moral compass, turning inner turmoil into outward clarity, a silent promise that vulnerability could disarm even the hardest hearts. But peace shattered with a buzz from his phone, Sarah's number. He answered, the violin's hush lingering. "Ridge, it's worse. Victor showed up at my sister's tonight. Didn't touch us, but he left a note. Promises break easy. Ask your biker friend." Her voice cracked, fear threading through like a dissonant chord. Lily's soft crying echoed in the background, a sound that twisted Ethan's gut. "We're packing to leave town, but I don't know if—" "Stay put," he cut in, resolve hardening. "Crew's got your back. I'll ride over now." He hung up, alerting Jax and Marco with a sharp whistle. Engines roared to life minutes later, 3 Harleys cutting through the dark like arrows, headlights slicing the night. The road wound past sleeping suburbs, the wind whipping Ethan's beard, carrying whispers of impending storm, thunder rumbling low on the horizon, the air thick with ozone. They arrived at Sarah's sister's modest ranch house, porch light glowing like a beacon. Sarah met them at the door, Lily peeking from behind her legs, eyes wide but trusting. The note lay on the kitchen table, scrawled in bold ink. A veiled threat, referencing Ethan's violin performance caught on mall cams, now twisted into leverage. "He's watching," Sarah whispered, handing over a USB drive, backup files from her ex's discarded laptop, grabbed in a moment of desperation during the divorce. "Proof of everything, but if we go public, he could—" Ethan took the drive, pocketing it beside Lily's drawing. "Then we time it right. Council meetings our stage. Truth hits harder than any bluff." Marco scanned the perimeter. Jack set up a quick security cam from his kit. As they fortified the house, simple measures, locks checked, a burner phone programmed, Lily tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Play something? To keep the bad away?" He knelt, violin ready, and coaxed a gentle lullaby from the strings, Beethoven's variations on a folk tune, soft and enveloping. The notes filled the room, easing tensions, drawing small smiles. Sarah watched, tears glistening. The moment a fragile bridge of hope amid the encroaching shadows. Outside, the thunder grew closer, mirroring the ethical storm. Expose Cain and risk retaliation, or hold back and let corruption claim another innocent life. As the crew mounted up to leave sentinels in shifts, Ethan felt the weight of converging paths, the personal redemption of honoring his vow to Ellie, intertwined with the vow's collective stand against institutional betrayal. Cain's web quivered, but the biker's melody promised a reckoning, one resonant truth at a time. Dawn would bring the council, and with it, the crescendo where loyalty faced its trial. If this chapter's stirring something deep in you, smash that like button. It helps spread these stories of quiet courage far and wide. The council chambers loomed like a fortress of polished oak and stern marble, the morning light filtering through tall windows in shafts that caught the dust motes dancing in the air. The room buzzed with the low murmur of locals packed into creaky wooden benches, veterans in faded caps, single mothers clutching folders of petitions, shop owners with worry lines etched deep. The scent of fresh coffee from a side table mingled with the faint mustiness of old proceedings, a reminder that this was where fates were decided, not with engines roaring, but with gavels falling. Ethan slipped in through a side door, his leather vest traded for a plain button-down that did little to hide the breadth of his shoulders or the ink peeking at his cuffs. The violin case stayed back at the garage, a silent partner waiting for its cue, but its essence hummed in his veins like a lingering refrain. He scanned the room, spotting Sarah in the front row, her posture rigid, Lily absent, but safe with a vow lookout at the safe house. Jax and Marco blended into the crowd, notebooks at the ready, their presence a subtle web of support. Victor Kane held court near the dais, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the rumpled attire of the attendees, flanked by two aides whose eyes darted like cornered rats. Kane's smile was all polished teeth, but Ethan saw the flicker, the predator sensing the shift in the wind. Last night's storm had cleared, leaving a crisp clarity to the day, but the ethical tempest brewed hotter, promises clashing against the machinery of power. The mayor, a portly man with a voice like gravel under tires, called the meeting to order with a bang of the gavel that echoed off the high ceilings. Agendas flew, zoning tweaks, budget allocations, the mundane veil over the real stakes. Then came Kane's proposal, eminent domain for the East Side expansion, a gleaming narrative of progress that masked the displacement of homes built on sweat and second chances. Voices rose in protest, a chorus of indignation from those who'd lose roofs over their heads, but the councillors nodded along, eyes glazing with rehearsed neutrality. Ethan felt the familiar churn, the same institutional indifference that had stonewalled his wife's care. Forms stamped denied, while life slipped away. His fist clenched under the bench, knuckles whitening, but he held, remembering the vow's creed, truth as the blade, not rage. Jax leaned in during a recess, his whisper urgent amid the shuffle of feet and clinking coffee cups. Olivia's in the wings, got her the full packet this morning, USB from Sarah, Grace's tape, the ledgers. She's primed to drop it live if the vote tips wrong. Ethan nodded. The weight of the USB now digital echoes in a journalist's hands, a modern arrow aimed at corruption's heart. Marco added from the other side, voice a low rumble. Kane's goon is outside, circling the lot, smells a trap. The air thickened with tension, the chamber's fans whirring like hesitant breaths. As attendees filed back in, the scent of rain-dampened coats adding a fresh edge to the stale proceedings. The vote loomed, councillors shuffling papers, Kane rising to speak with the confidence of a man who'd bought the script. His words flowed smooth, jobs created, communities uplifted, a poetic lie that twisted Ethan's gut. But as Kane gestured grandly, a murmur rippled through the back. Olivia, sharp-featured and unyielding, slipped into a seat near the press row, her laptop screen glowing faintly. Ethan caught Sarah's eye across the aisle. She gave a small nod, her fingers twisting a tissue, the fragile hope of a mother clinging to justice's thread. Memories surfaced unbidden. Ellie's tiny form in his arms, her fevered whispers of, "Daddy, promise you'll fix it," a vow that had propelled him from grief's abyss to this chamber, where personal redemption intertwined with a broader stand. The mayor cleared his throat, polling the council one by one. "Ah, yes," trickled in, the balance teetering like a bike on a narrow ridge. Then disruption. A councillor, an older woman with a veteran's pin on her lapel, tipped off by Marco's network, held up a hand. "Point of order," she said, voice steady as rebar. "New evidence on the table. I'd like to review before casting." Gasps rippled, Kane's face paling beneath the tan, his aides whispering furiously. Olivia rose then, her voice cutting through like a violin's piercing high note. "With the chamber's permission, I've got documents here. Financial trails, witness accounts, showing conflicts of interest in Mr. Kane's bid. This isn't progress, it's plunder." Chaos bloomed, the gavel pounding futilely as papers circulated, flashes from phones capturing the unraveling. Kane bolted upright, sputtering denials, but the tide had turned, whispers of arrests, investigations. The sheriff's office suddenly unavailable for comment. Ethan watched from the shadows, heart thundering in rhythm with the unfolding symphony of accountability. Sarah's relief washed over her features, a tear tracing down as she mouthed, "Thank you." But victory's edge sharpened with peril. Kane's glare swept the room, locking on Ethan with venomous recognition. The goon's shadow loomed outside the windows, a promise of retaliation in the post-meeting haze. As the meeting dissolved into adjournments and hurried calls, Ethan moved swiftly, weaving through the crowd to Sarah's side. "It's breaking his way," he murmured, guiding her toward the exit, Jax and Marco flanking like silent guardians. The air outside hit cool and invigorating, carrying the faint ozone of cleared skies, but tension coiled tight. The council's review would take days, enough time for Kane to strike back. Sarah gripped his arm, voice hushed. "He won't stop. That note last night. It's just the start." Ethan scanned the parking lot, spotting the goon's SUV idling at the curb, engine purring low. "Then we don't either. Bow's got plans in motion. Safe routes out if needed, more leaks to keep the pressure on." They parted at her car. Lily's drawing now a shared talisman slipped into Sarah's hand. Ethan mounted his Harley, the engine's growl a defiant counterpoint to the chamber's fading echoes. Jax and Marco revved beside him, a trio cutting through the midday traffic, wind-whipping tales of loyalty into the breeze. Back at the garage, reports flooded in, Olivia's story going viral, tips pouring from Kane's former associates, the web fraying thread by thread. But as evening shadows lengthened, a call came. Grace, voice trembling, the diner vandalized, a warning scrawled in spray paint. Ethan's resolve hardened, the violin's silent strings urging him onward. Redemption wasn't a single note. It was the full movement, building to a close where honor silenced the storm. Night settled over the outpost like a heavy curtain, the fire pit's flames casting elongated shadows that danced across the garage walls. Ethan paced, the scent of charred wood and cooling metal grounding him amid the swirl of strategy. The council's delay bought time, but Kane's desperation could unleash chaos, subtle pressures turning overt, the kind that tested oaths to their core. He thought of Ellie again, her imagined applause for this stand, the family chosen in the vow, mirroring the one lost. Tomorrow would demand more than evidence. It would call for the quiet courage that turned strangers into allies, promises into legacies. The road ahead curved toward confrontation's edge, but Ethan rode it unbroken, one resonant step closer to dawn's moral light. The garage's night watch stretched into the small hours, the fire pit reduced to glowing embers that popped softly against the encroaching dark. Ethan sat on an overturned crate, the violin case open before him like an unspoken invitation, its strings catching the faint moonlight filtering through the bay door. The air hung heavy with the residue of rain-soaked earth and the acrid bite of smouldering oak, a sensory anchor in the quiet storm of waiting. Jax monitored feeds on his laptop, the screen's blue glow etching hollows under his eyes, while Marco dozed lightly in a hammock strung between beams. His breathing steady as a metronome. Reports trickled in, Olivia's exposé rippling through online forums, anonymous tips swelling like a gathering convoy. But the core tension coiled tighter. Kane's cornered and cornered men lashed out. Ethan's fingers traced the violin's F-holes, the wood smooth as whispered confessions, evoking the chamber's chaos earlier that day. The council's adjournment had been a fragile victory, the evidence packet handed off like a baton in a relay of justice. But Sarah's call had confirmed the shadows lengthening, the diner's vandalism, a crude message spray-painted across the window, "Back off or burn." Grace was shaken but unbowed, her voice over the line fierce. "Tell your crew I'll testify, no more hiding." Ethan's chest tightened with the weight of it all, the personal vow to Ellie intertwining with the vow's collective oath. A symphony of redemption, where each note built toward harmony. He'd lost too much to indifference once. This time, honor would crescendo to closure. Dawn broke with a hesitant blush on the horizon, painting the outpost in strokes of pale gold and lingering indigo. Engines stirred to life as the crew mobilized, 3 Harleys purring in unison, their chrome gleaming like drawn blades. Ethan led the ride to Sarah's sister's house, the road unfurling through mist-shrouded fields, dew-kissed wildflowers nodding along the shoulders. The wind carried the clean scent of wet grass and distant pine, whipping away the night's doubts, leaving only the rhythmic thrum of tires on asphalt. Lily spotted them from the porch, her small face lighting up as she waved, the pink backpack slung over one shoulder like a badge of survival. Sarah emerged beside her, coffee mug in hand, steam curling like fragile hope. "You're still here," Sarah said, relief softening her edges as Ethan dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. Lily darted forward, hugging his leg with the unreserved trust of the saved. "The bad man's gone?" she asked, eyes searching his. Ethan knelt, ruffling her hair gently, the silver in his beard catching the light. "Working on it, kid. Truth's got momentum now." He straightened, turning to Sarah, who handed over a thermos of black coffee, strong, unsweetened, the way riders took it. "Council reconvenes today. Olivia's story hit the local news at midnight. They're calling for an emergency session. Kane's scrambling. Cops raided his office an hour ago, untainted ones from the state." The words landed like a resolving chord, but Ethan sensed the undercurrent. "The goon?" Jax asked, helmet under arm, scanning the tree line. Sarah nodded toward the house. "Left a package at the gate last night. Photos of you all, timestamps from the mall. Bluff, but it chilled me." Marco grunted, circling the perimeter with practiced eyes. "Bluff or bait. Either way, we ride escort to the chambers. No lone wolves." The plan wove tight. Deliver Sarah safely, bolster the witnesses, let the system's cleaner gears grind Kane down. But as they mounted up, Ethan felt the pull of his scars, the fevered hospital nights, the empty highway after Ellie's passing, a reminder that justice wasn't abstract. It was the quiet fulfillment of promises, family chosen in the face of loss. The convoy rolled into town under a sky clearing to unmarred blue, the sun climbing to warm the leather of their vests. At the chambers, the crowd had swelled, a sea of determined faces spilling onto the steps, vets with signs reading, "Honor the oath," mothers linking arms in solidarity. Ethan guided Sarah through, Lily clutching her hand, the air buzzing with murmurs and the faint creak of protest signs. Inside, the oak-panelled room thrummed with anticipation, the mayor's gavel already poised like a conductor's baton. Kane sat isolated at the back, suit rumpled, his earlier poise cracked into something feral. The goon was absent, likely in custody, whispers confirming an arrest on unrelated warrants that now tied back neatly. Proceedings ignited swiftly. Olivia took the stand first, her voice clear and unyielding, projecting files onto a screen, ledgers exposed, emails unredacted, Grace's testimony playing in crisp audio. The chamber fell silent, save for the hum of the projector and the occasional gasp, the moral weight settling like dust after a storm. Councillors shifted, faces paling as connections surfaced. Bribes to sway votes, eminent domain twisted for personal gain. Sarah followed, her words measured, detailing the threats, the tampered tire, Lily's terror in the mall, a human thread weaving through the data. "This isn't just business," she said, voice steady, eyes locking on the dais, "it's lives broken for profit." Ethan watched from the wings, Jax and Marco flanking, their presence a silent bulwark. Kane's glare found him again, venom laced with defeat, but Ethan met it unflinching. The violin's phantom melody, underscoring the scene. Beethoven's finality, resolution in the face of discord. When the vote came, unanimous rejection of the proposal, followed by motions for full investigation, applause erupted, raw and cathartic, echoing off the marble like thunder rolling home. Cain was escorted out in cuffs, his empire crumbling under the light of exposed truth, no fists thrown, just the poetic justice of accountability. Outside, under the midday sun, the crowd dispersed in waves of relieved chatter, the air alive with the scent of blooming jasmine from nearby planters. Sarah hugged Ethan fiercely, Lily beaming up at him. "You fixed it, like you promised." He smiled, rare and genuine, the weight in his chest lifting like fog burned away. "We all did. Vows got your back any time." As they parted, Sarah toward a future unshadowed, the crew toward the open road, Ethan paused at his Harley, pulling the violin from its case. For Lily, one last piece, the joyful allegro from the Kreutzer, bow dancing in bright arcs, drawing smiles and nods from passers-by. Strangers paused again, frozen not in tears but in shared triumph. The melody, a bridge from pain to peace. Back at the outpost that evening, the fire pit blazed high, brothers gathering with cold beers and stories of the day's ride. Jax raised a toast, to promises kept and roads ahead. Ethan nodded, the violin resting beside him, its wood warm from the flames. Ellie would have approved, this redemption, woven from loss into legacy. The iron vows loyalty a family forged in fire. The stars wheeled overhead, engines silent for now, but the hum of honor lingered, a eternal refrain in the quiet night. If this tale of quiet courage touched your soul, thank you for riding along. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more stories of redemption and unbreakable bonds coming your way. Until next time, keep your promises close.